All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a topic that is just so deeply relatable. We're talking about reframing overthinking. When your mind reads between the lines, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Those totally quiet, seemingly tiny everyday moments that, out of literally nowhere, can just completely hijack your mood. You send a text, you get kind of a weird reply back, and boom, your whole day is completely derailed. We usually just write this off as a personal flaw, like, oh, it's just a bad habit or some quirky personality trait. But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? Today, we're going to break down some really insightful material that completely reframes how we process the world around us. Let's get right into it.
So picture this. Someone just says the word maybe to you. Literally just a simple maybe. But all of a sudden, your mind hears a completely different sentence. It hears, you don't matter that much. Now, you probably call this overthinking. Society definitely calls it overthinking. But look at this question. What if it's actually not overthinking at all? What if instead it's just a really profound misinterpretation? To see what I mean, let's look at the wild split between reality and our own internal narrative. On the left side here, we've got the pure objective facts, just what actually happened. A delayed text reply, a vague answer to a simple question, maybe a tiny, slight change in someone's tone of voice. These are things so small nobody else in the room even notices them. But over on the right, well, that's what your mind actually heard. The maybe magically morphs into full-on rejection. Silence suddenly translates to emotional distance. Totally neutral words become these blaring sirens of emotional signals. It's fascinating because this brilliantly shows that we rarely react to what actually happened. We're reacting to the frantic little story our mind just made up to fill in the blanks. All right, moving into section 1, assigning meaning too quickly, the hidden pattern. Let's look under the hood and figure out what the brain is actually trying to accomplish when it starts spinning all these stories. Most of us just assume overthinking is exactly what it sounds like, right? Just thinking too much. But we're going to dismantle that myth right now with this definition. Overthinking is actually about assigning meaning way too quickly to find safety in uncertainty. Seriously, your mind isn't broken. In fact, it is doing exactly what it was biologically and psychologically designed to do. It's trying to protect you, predict outcomes, and find safety when faced with the unknown. Think about it in an evolutionary sense. Back in ancient times, assuming a rustling bush was a dangerous predator, that kept us alive. It absolutely paid off to jump to the worst-case scenario. The thing is, today, that exact same survival mechanism is being applied to, our text messages and office emails. When a situation is unclear, your brain hates saying, I don't know what this means. It vastly prefers saying, let me decide what this means right now so we can be fully prepared for the worst.
I want to let this quote sink in for a second. The problem is not that you feel deeply. The problem is that your mind treats feelings like facts. Wow, that is a massive aha moment right there. When you're faced with the unknown, your brain just rushes to choose a meaning to keep you safe. And here is the catch. It almost always chooses the meaning that feels the most familiar, not necessarily the one that's the most accurate. Like if you have a history of feeling left out, or if past experiences made you feel unvalued, your brain is going to instantly interpret a delayed text as you being left out all over again. It treats that familiar, painful feeling as an absolute, indisputable fact, even when it's entirely fabricated.
Which brings us to section 2, the highly perceptive mind, the root cause. Let's look at the actual mechanics behind why our system reacts this way in the first place. Like, why do some of us jump to these conclusions so much faster than everyone else?
Well, think of your inner world as this giant radar dish that just never powers down. It is constantly, relentlessly scanning your environment for 3 specific things: connection, safety, and reassurance. When something feels even slightly off in a conversation or a relationship, your system reacts instantly. Honestly, I think it's time to reframe your entire experience here. You aren't being dramatic. You aren't being irrational. You are simply highly attentive. You notice that slight hesitation before someone answers a question. You pick up on those subtle tone shifts that everyone else in the room completely ignores. Your internal data intake is just operating at a much, much higher frequency.
And this perfectly illustrates the trap we fall into. Because we're so intensely perceptive, when we catch those tiny little signals, our default setting is to internalize them instead of translating them. On the left side here, you see our immediate response. Did I do something wrong? Or am I being too much? Or do they even care? We instantly make it about ourselves. It becomes an indictment of our own worth. But what we very rarely do is look to the alternative on the right and ask the critical, objective question, okay, what else could this mean? Let's move on to section 3. Emotions are just messages, the paradigm shift. We're going to build a completely new mental model here that fundamentally changes how we handle these sudden emotional spikes.
So what if we just stopped treating our emotions as final verdicts? Look at the contrast here. The old way over on the left acts like a devastating conclusion. I feel ignored, therefore I must not matter. Boom, case closed. The emotion immediately shuts the door on any other possibility. But notice the new way, on the right. I feel ignored. What is this feeling trying to protect? By treating your emotion as a message rather than a cold hard fact, you create this invaluable space. You start to realize, hey, maybe my brain is just asking for clarity or begging for reassurance or pushing for more direct communication. It is an alert system. It's not a judge and jury.
Now, this next point requires a whole lot of self-compassion because it's absolutely vital. Your emotion is not the problem. Your interpretation is just incomplete. Seriously, your feelings are entirely valid. You are always allowed to feel hurt or anxious or uncertain. The problem, really the missing link in this whole chain, is simply that your translation is incomplete. Your interpretation just jumped the gun before all the objective data was actually in.
Okay, section 4, the 3-question framework, breaking the pattern. Now that we fully understand the mechanism, how the brain frantically fills in blanks to find safety, let's dive into a simple, highly actionable solution to actually short-circuit this entire process. You're going to want to keep this 3-step framework right in your back pocket. The next time you feel that sudden emotional spike from a vague text, a weird look, or a super quiet room, force yourself to pause and run through these 3 steps. Step 1. What am I feeling right now? And you really have to be specific here. Don't just say bad or weird. Say, I feel dismissed, or I feel highly anxious. Name it clearly. Step 2. What meaning am I attaching to this? Ask yourself, am I assuming they don't care or they're mad at me? Expose the story your brain is writing. And finally, step 3, which is the absolute circuit breaker. What is a more neutral explanation? Could it be they're just incredibly busy today? Have they maybe simply not decided yet? Are they tired? Do I just lack the full information to make a call right now? Moving into our final stretch, section 5, context instead of control, empowerment. This final section is all about giving your feelings proper context instead of letting them just seize control of your entire reality. This right here is the truth that most people completely miss, and honestly, it's a massive identity shift. You are highly perceptive without a translation system. Think about that. You are not too emotional. You aren't fundamentally broken or overly sensitive or too much. You are simply a highly perceptive human being, but you've been operating without a translation system. You have all this raw data coming in, all these complex interpersonal nuances that you're brilliantly picking up on, and you just needed the right toolkit to decode it properly instead of turning it against yourself. Once you learn to actually translate your emotions rather than just blindly reacting to them, a very tangible transformation takes place. You move away from that dark storm of assuming and spiraling into worst-case scenarios, and you step into the bright clarity of asking and understanding. You stop assuming the absolute worst about people's intentions, and you start asking curious, open questions. You stop spiraling out of control into a pit of self-doubt, and you start genuinely understanding both your own needs and the reality of the people around you. It's a total game changer for how you navigate relationships. Not every maybe is rejection. Not every silence is distance. Not every feeling is truth. Let's just sit with that for a second. Sometimes, a feeling is just a message waiting patiently to be understood. The moment you master the art of separating the raw facts of what actually happened from the subjective, fear-based story of what it meant to you, something incredible happens. You don't just think differently, you actually feel lighter. That heavy cognitive load of constantly defending yourself against imaginary threats, it just vanishes. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important question. The next time you feel that familiar spike of anxiety over a delayed response or a strange tone of voice, what will you do? Will you let your emotions act as the final absolute conclusions about your worth? Or will you pause, use the framework, and treat them as the helpful messages they were always meant to be? The choice is entirely yours.